Duy. Khi hội nghị của hội chuyên gia tại Washington DC, anh cũng là phó chủ tịch ủy ban ngoại vụ của ủy ban vận động chính trị của người Việt. Và về vấn đề học hành thì anh Duy tốt nghiệp tại cử nhân kinh tế và chính trị tại Đại học University of California, Davis. Ngoài ra còn học cái MBA cao học về quản trị tại trường University of Chicago, và anh hiện đang làm chuyên gia tài chính tại ngân hàng thế giới tại Washington DC. Ngoài công việc hàng ngày thì anh Duy đã tham gia rất nhiều trong các hoạt động về cộng đồng, đấu tranh cho tự do dân chủ, và hiện anh cũng đã nhiều lần đi ra Quốc hội Hoa Kỳ để điều trần về vấn đề Việt Nam cũng như các vấn đề liên hệ đến tự do dân chủ. Tôi xin được mời anh Hoàng Thế Duy.
Kính thưa quý vị và các anh chị, vì đây là mùa bầu cử cho nên chúng tôi xin bắt đầu bằng cái poll. Thì ở đây xin hỏi là quý vị nào quen thuộc với cái ngôn từ thị trường chứng khoán, xin giơ tay lên. Okay. Who here is feels like they're familiar with the stock market and the concept of the stock market? Please raise your hand. Vì ông hội trưởng cái đề cao vấn đề đa văn hóa, cho nên chúng tôi xin trình bày bằng tiếng Anh trong cái hiện tại hôm nay. Thì xin anh slide kế tiếp đó. Thì no, it's that one. Okay. If you look at Vietnam's economy, okay, you can think of it as a glass half full, a glass half empty. Because if you look at the progress that the country has made, especially since 1986, in a way they are quite significant. Vietnam in 1987 had to import rice. Okay, it was a starvation problem. Today, Vietnam is one of the leading exporters of many foodstuffs like rice, coffee, pepper, and so forth. Since the last 15 years, Vietnam has also attracted significant foreign investment and has been one of the fastest growing economies in Asia. In fact, in the last 10-15 years, only China has grown faster than Vietnam. So that is the glass half full. However, all the reforms that have resulted have come at a very slow pace. They've been very halting, and you never know whether they're going to continue or not. And although the country has progressed, but what yardstick do you measure it against? You measure it against complete backwardness in the mid-80s, or what the country can achieve vis-a-vis the region, and ultimately the potential of the Vietnamese people. And all this growth that has been achieved, who has benefited the most from it, and what are the consequences for equality and opportunity for the rest of society? So, looking at this glass, you do see some progress, but you see tremendous potential that's still indent. And one area where we can look at this is through the stock market. There are many ways to look at the economy, but in the time that's available today, I just wanted just one example, and that's the stock market, or also known as the equity market. So the question is, why are we talking about the equity market today? Well, first of all, it's completely essential for our private sector. You can't have a private sector unless you have entrepreneurs who own their own businesses and have a stake in that economy. And for that economy to grow and to be developed, then you also need stable sources of long-term financing. A lot of Vietnamese firms, private firms, raise money internally through a small network of friends and family. You can't grow a firm that way. Other ways to get financing is, for instance, through banks. Banks lend to companies, and companies have to pay back. But those are unstable sources. If you want a stable source of funding, equity is the best. Because basically, equity is you sell a stake in the company to investors, and you don't have to pay them back, and they get a share of all the profits of the company. And furthermore, the importance of the equity market in the context of Vietnam is it's really a signal of the commitment of the government to genuine economic and legal reform. Because to have a functioning equity market, you need a system of contracts with accounting, of laws. So when there's a full-fledged equity market now, that is a sign that there has been some economic and legal reform. Now granted, this doesn't mean that there's been political reform, but oftentimes this economic reform can have some positive political benefits, but by itself, it's not a substitute for political reform. Next slide, please. So, a quick summary. These are some of the key points of the last 15 to 20 years. Obviously, in 1986, the policy of the Reformation, renovation of the economy, and since 1993, there's been an effort to start planning for the stock market, and this effort has consisted of a number of different steps. The first is to create the sort of regulatory structure for a stock market. For instance, like in the U.S., there's the Securities and Exchange Commission. A similar organization was created in Vietnam. And at the same time, there was a process to privatize, or as it's called, equitize state-owned enterprises so they can become companies that are on the stock market. In the early 90s, there were about 6,000 state-owned enterprises in Vietnam. A little over 1,000 have been sold off. The next important development was in the year 2000 when the Enterprises Law was passed. And from my understanding, this was a major development because it streamlined the process for companies to be formed. Whereas in the past, the way a company was formed required many, many licenses. You had to get permission. Now it's been moved more to a registration culture where you just register the new business. And as a result, the number of firms that were registered in Vietnam between, say, 2000 and 2002 were more than the whole 1990s. So it's led to a big growth in businesses being formed. Another milestone is that in 2001, the Constitution of the Socialist Republic of Vietnam was amended to recognize the private sector. Now, all of us here take this Constitution with a tremendous grain of salt, okay, because we know the extent to which, important parts of the Constitution is in fact respected. However, it's still a significant progress, development in the sense that there's at least a recognition or a lip service to the private sector, and where that gets followed through is another story, but there's that recognition. So that's a development. And with all those changes, it culminated in the opening of the stock market in July of 2000. And when the stock market initially opened, there were 2 companies that were listed on the exchange. And this has grown now to 23. This in itself is an important milestone because in this communist country now there is a stock market. However, the market is still very nascent. To give you an example, if you go to the next slide, comparing the stock market in Vietnam to other countries by market capitalization, the Vietnam stock market today is worth about $250 million. Compare that with the Philippines, which is over 20 billion, Indonesia over 50 billion, and Malaysia, Thailand, and Singapore well over 100 billion. So the stock market in Vietnam is very, very tiny. Now obviously the economy of Vietnam is smaller than all those economies, but if you look at just the share of the stock market versus the overall economy of Vietnam, it's still a much smaller share than the other economies. It shows the extent of the financial sector of Vietnam being very underdeveloped, and the number of companies who are on the stock market being very limited. Next slide, please. So, what are some of these limitations? The first thing is that of the 23 firms in Vietnam on the stock market, not one was a private firm that used the stock market to raise money. All 23 were former state-owned enterprises that now are on the stock exchange. And then virtually none of these SOEs were sold for IPOs. In fact, only one IPO, initial public offering, has occurred in Vietnam. The other ones have been basically SOEs have been equitized, where their shares have been given to the management. Then those shares have been several years later listed on the exchange. Okay, so it hasn't been really what you would think of as a normal stock market. And as a result of the stock market not functioning like one would expect, it's led to a very large informal market. And it's estimated that there's this informal or over-the-counter market that's 6 times the size of the stock market, where people are trading shares in coffee shops, on curbsides,